All right, welcome to TIL Talks with Chris White, where we talk TILs, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies, both with patients and caregivers, along with industry leaders. Let's get going. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional and expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. Today's episode, I'm talking with Mr. Gary Keller. Gary was in the exact same clinical trial that I was in at the same location. In fact, he was the first patient at that location as I was the last. I came across his profile in 2020, reached out and connected, and here we go. I'm super stoked to have you on today, dude. I stumbled across the UC Health interview with you. I think it was in the fall of 2020, if I'm correct, and realized that we had the same doctor and we're in the same clinical trial.
In the same boat, right? Like,
Yeah, same diagnosis, same path of treatment until we got to the one treatment that worked. Come to find out, you are the first patient at UC Health for this trial, and I am the last one. I'd have to ask you exactly when infusion date was to try to timeline, but were you the first patient just for UC Health at CU Anschutz, or were you the first patient in cohort 4, or tell me about it?
so yeah, my understanding was I was the first person at Anschutz to go through. There's somebody that was maybe a day, maybe two behind me, pretty immediately behind me. There was a little bit of unknown going into that. I know that there was a lot of research with TIL, and they had an idea what was going to happen, but none of the doctors had any experience as far as what's going to happen next. It was interesting. Like you, I feel like I was all in. It was all or nothing at that point for me. I don't know a lot about you, Chris, but from and how we've connected, I feel like you going in, you were much worse off than I was. I think your cancer was far more spread and far in you than me. I think you posted your scans and I was like, whoa, you were really, really sick going into this stuff. So it's an amazing process to be going through cancer. Things aren't really working. You're starting to be at that point in your life, at least I was like, okay, what does the next steps look like for my family? Am I going to make it to Christmas? It's August right here. I don't know. Those are the things that are hard to put words to until then all of a sudden you get through TIL, you do the treatment, you go through that nightmare of the IL-2, right? And those, is it 6 doses they gave us? I think it was 6.
I mean, that's whatever you can tolerate, really. I mean, that's for the trial, it was up to 6 doses. Now, I know not everybody could make it up to 6 doses, and there's been studies that shown that even just having one is something's better than nothing. But I mean, I went through all 6.
I was pretty determined to get to all 6 because in my head I was like, that's going to be the only way for me. So that's my story in a nutshell. It was an adventure. Yeah, man. I think the hardest part about cancer, and I tell this to a lot of people going into it, it's the psyche game. It's how it gets in your head. Not so much the disease process. Like, it's spreading, or any idiot can read those scans that pop up for you, and you're like, yeah, that can't be good. But there's a long time with me throughout the journey that I was going through that it was, I didn't ever really feel sick. I was fortunate that way. I wasn't towards the end where I started noticing some things, but it was much harder on my psyche. And I feel like, people like yourself, like I know you do a lot of advocacy and a lot of speaking towards that. That gives people a lot of hope, inspiring. Like, never been able to do that. I don't have good words, I feel like, for that sort of thing. I stand up in front of people and like, yeah, I had cancer. It sucks really bad. So good on you for doing the stuff that you're doing. It's pretty amazing.
I really appreciate it because it's been more therapeutic in the last handful of years to talk about it, because I didn't really even acknowledge it or talk about it when it was actually all going down. It messed with my head. I felt that if I acknowledged it and talked about it, I didn't want to get like the pity party and be like, oh, Chris is dying, that sort of thing. And I kind of played it off like, that it wasn't as bad as it really was. And I say this in almost every conversation I have, but I totally went Tyler Durden Fight Club on it, because
Right.
this mentality of, if I'm going out swinging. And I saw that sand in the hourglass falling down. I was like, what do I got to lose? And if I was in person with somebody, I would talk about it, but I wasn't sharing anything social media. I wasn't trying to get
Right.
involved in any other way. I was still trying to work. tried to maintain activity, body in motion stays in motion. But I knew that if I just sat still and didn't do anything, like it wasn't going to be good. I had to keep busy. And I kind of feel that you probably can sense the same sort of thing. I've read a handful of things. You're an active snowboarder, father. You live in Colorado. That's the state of keep moving. Nobody's moves to Colorado to just do nothing.
Yeah. No, that's true. I love snowboarding. You and I need to get up on the slopes because I see your snowboard back there.
Yep.
Yeah, I know we've talked about it before. And my son's a swimmer. So whenever he's not at a swim meet, we try to get up snowboarding and just we have a great time at it. It's a great hobby. Expensive hobby. God, that's expensive. Yeah, it's fantastic. I like what you said about a body in motion stays in motion. I was lucky that I was able to exercise throughout the entire experience. And even at points where I felt like I was slowing down, I was still getting into the gym and doing my things. I was very fortunate with that. I go to one of those it's a small CrossFit gym that I've been working out at it forever. And that small community really bound together and helped my family out a lot. All those little pieces come together that you don't even realize. And at times when you don't even realize you need help, and they're there. So I still exercise as much as I possibly can to get in there. And it's fantastic. I get outdoors. Part of what I do growing up, going to college, and I lived in Colorado my whole life. I worked my summers as a river guide. And so I still get out. This treatment was fantastic because I didn't lose any organs, right? And so I can still get out. I can still go to my gym. I can still snowboard. I can take my family out on a week-long raft trip. Like you, I burn a lot easier now. So I wear a big hood and a hat. And yeah, we get out on our raft trips and, try to, like you said, body in motion stays in motion. We just try to exercise as much as possible, enjoy ourselves while we do it.
Yeah, no room to be stagnant. Saw enough Netflix and Hulu and all of that to last me a lifetime within the times I had no choice but to sit down and do that. And I don't even have like streamed anything now. It's rabbit ears. It's not important. It was in-person interaction, engagement. My mental health took a huge nosedive, and I didn't even realize that was what was happening until years later. And then you could probably consent to this or concur with this, but having cancer was probably worse on my family than it was for me, because they're the ones that are having to witness it. And I was just pretending like I was Tyler Durden from Fight Club, like I was living out some character in a movie. And the reality of it was they were having to deal with all the things that go along with that. And now as I look back on it, I'm like, oh my God, what did I put them through? It's nuts.
It is nuts. You and I know some other cancer survivors or people in the middle of it. We should get together with some of these people and write a book about how to manage your psyche while fighting cancer and fighting something with a dire diagnosis as well. And what that does to the people around you. I agree with you. I'm sure I was hard on my wife because I was in fight mode quite a bit of the time, and it's fight or flight, right? Like that whole, we're moving into, I have nothing left to do but fight for every second.
Straight up. I was at Advanced Therapies Week in Dallas. It's a global conference, and last year it was in Florida. And next year it's going to be in San Diego. But I ended up meeting Susan Nichols from Propel Bio and sat at a roundtable session with her that she was moderating, and it was over mental health and the whole conference specific to cell and gene therapies. There's only a handful of patients there, but I had met with her prior to that roundtable, and she was sharing with me her experience with some of her family and what they had kind of gone through. And it kind of reminded me when we were at that roundtable and talking about how much it's not even brought up when you're enrolling in the trial or you're going through the treatment, and how important survivorship and recovery is just as important to actually going through the treatment itself. And if there's enough focus on their survivorship and recovery that there is actually going through it, then there'll be a lot more success stories and people like ourselves that are proactively talking about it. And that's, for me, the most frustrating thing, is because for our diagnosis, man, I'm 42, about to be 43. Pretty sure we're close in the same age. I was 36 when I was diagnosed, but the average age for our diagnosis is 70 years old. And even though there's other people with our same diagnosis and maybe have gone through the same treatment, the majority of them that have made it long term, you don't have the same life scenarios necessarily. For me, I just couldn't feel like I relate to a lot of the people because there's just not many of us. And so that's how I started trying to branch out and connect and everything. That's another reason why I'm super stoked how I came across meeting you. Have you met or connected with many other patients, one with our diagnosis, but two other patients that have gone through TIL and or any other cellular gene therapies?
A little bit. There was a guy that I was saying that started just a day or two after me at Anschutz. And, I met him, talked to him a little bit, but afterwards I didn't follow up with, especially during that time. I really had a hard time connecting with people with the same diagnosis. Part of that was, so part of my story, I guess, was to meet Dr. Medina. There was I'm a teacher, I'm an educator, and a good friend of mine is a counselor in another high school, another building. And I called him up after I had my diagnosis, and I was like, "Hey, man, I'm going through this. I just got this news from my doctor. I have this surgery scheduled. I think they're going to pull out all my lymph nodes. It's melanoma." It gave him the rundown for what it was going to look like for me, and he's like, "This is crazy, but the basketball coach I work with, he has the same diagnosis he got about 2 weeks ago. And he's going down to Anschutz and talking with, it wasn't Dr. Medina, but it was somebody else on the team. Maybe it was even Dr. Medina was down there." And so anyway, I called this guy up and he coached me up, basketball coach. He's like, "You got to come down to Anschutz. You got to get down here, cancel that surgery. This is what they're doing down here with immunotherapies." He had the mucosal melanoma. And so I went down, met with Dr. Medina, canceled all my surgeries that I had. It was like going to be the next day. And I was like, I'm going to go talk to these doctors before we do this. We can reschedule the surgery if we need to. Got into epacadostat was another immunotherapy I was doing. And he was doing the same thing. I never met Steve down at Anschutz, but the guy was dead 2 months later. And he was young, like us, baby on the way. He already had a kid. Just a terrible situation. And I was talking to another friend of mine. He's a Marine Corps guy. And he's like, "Man, it's like you're in the trenches and the guy next to you stuck his head up to look around and got his head blown off. And here you are going, what do I do now?" Like, sort of thing. And so I kind of shied away from connecting with anybody else after that, because I was like, well, what if I'm doing well and they're not? Or what if they're doing well and I'm not? And I couldn't do it.
You 100% hit the nail on the head right there, man, with survivor guilt. To me, that's worse than anxiety. Shit, it's worse than probably anything. And it plagues me to connect with other people and really talk about it. I mean, it really hits me to the core, and I'm so glad you touched on that. And before I say anything else, first of all, God bless Dr. Medina.
Yeah, absolutely.
She
Yeah.
has got to be the most compassionate, empathetic, most loving, like, person like on this planet. And I know she has zero social media, but I cannot say enough good things about Dr. Medina. Like, I just absolutely love her to pieces, bro. Like, for real. I just, yeah.
She's a big hero in our family for sure.
I gotta say, man, anybody, I'm sure you've probably met other people as well that are her patients that you end up meeting down the road, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I went to see you, and I was a patient at Anschutz." Yeah, she might not be on social media and stuff like that, but amongst the community, definitely famous. And once Dr. Lewis had left to go to Regeneron, Dr. Medina became the head investigator for CU. And out of the 57 global locations for the clinical trial that we were in, CU Anschutz in Aurora, Colorado had the most participants for any one location. So that's a lot to take on. My infusion was January 15th, 2020. So I'm the very last patient of cohort 4. Do you know, are you cohort 4 or were you cohort 2? Do you remember? Or do you know your day 0 infusion date?
It would have been in August. And so what am I? I think I'm 8 years in August. So that would have been 2016. Is that right? Am I doing that math right?
Man, I can't math. If I'm correct, you were diagnosed in 16 and then you had your infusion. It said 22 months later. I think you might have been cohort 2, but you were the first patient at.
I love, Chris, that you know the story better than I do, because I stopped tracking it. I was just like, somebody tell me to be someplace, I'm going to be there. And that was my mindset. The study coordinators were like, "You come in on this date." And it was the beginning of August, because I had to take some time off work when I got done with TIL. I got septic with E. coli, but it wasn't near as bad as it sounds. Like I felt like I had the flu. I was taking some aspirin. And as soon as I got out of that hospital, as glorious as that place is, I got to sleep in my own bed. I was instantly better. Like it turned the corner on it at that point. I think all my labs started clearing up quickly after that.
Remember how many days you spent in the hospital?
I do remember how many days I was in the hospital. So I think they were planning on 14 for me. And I think I was there 15. I think they kept me an extra day.
Gotcha. Did you have to go in each day afterwards for extra blood checks and infusions? You got out on day 15, go in on day 16, 17, 18, blood draws, so forth?
I was doing blood draws, but I was back up in Fort Collins, and UC Health is widespread in Colorado. Or CU Health. Is it CU Health? What? I was just going to the blood draw in Fort Collins and whatever hoops I had to jump through at that point. So I didn't have to go back down. I think I went back down a couple months later and got a scan. It must have been 3 months later. And they were like, whoa, almost everything's gone.
Did you continue to go into Aurora every 3 months afterwards until your 60-month consent was complete?
Yep, certainly did. And so I make that drive, and Dr. Medina was great about, like I said, I'm a teacher. So if I could make my appointments in the morning as early as she was comfortable getting there, and I'd go down and have my appointment and blood draws or whatever they had me do, and then drive on back, and I'd miss like first period, maybe second period, and I could get back into my classroom.
Phenomenal about working with everybody on making sure you can get in. And it's super important. One of the things I remember that stuck out with me is the amount of time when you go in for your follow-up appointments that they take to sit down with you and talk about your lab results, your scan results, go over any questions. And that to me, like, stuck out significantly. I'm sure you probably concur with the same, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I'm curious. You're in Austin, is that right?
I'm actually in North Dallas.
North Dallas. Okay, so you're in Texas. How did you find Dr. Medina? How were you making those appointments? How did you make that happen?
So this is kind of wild. When I was diagnosed in the summer of 2018, I went to Texas Oncology, and they immediately told me that, my diagnosis was really rare, although, they could provide treatments. But for me to really have the best chance, I should definitely see a specialist. And they asked me if I would mind seeking a second opinion and going to MD Anderson. And so I said, absolutely, 100%. And from where I live in North Dallas down to Houston and MD Anderson, it's like about a 4-hour drive. So I got referred to them. And even though MD Anderson and Texas Oncology are two separate organizations, me being the patient was able to get the two of them essentially to work together. So MD Anderson was like the captain of the ship, and Texas Oncology was the first mate kind of a situation. And so MD Anderson kind of gave me the lay of the land with my diagnosis and the treatment plans. And so when I would have to do my 6-week follow-up scans and or specific radiation or surgeries, that was all done at MD Anderson. But when I was down there and they would prescribe any immunotherapy or chemotherapy or whatever, that's something that you can actually get done anywhere. And so I would coordinate with Texas Oncology to get them to administer it to me. So I didn't have to literally drive all the way down from North Texas to Houston to get that done. And so after I had done a course of therapies and it finally came time for me to move on from what my next option was, MD Anderson, this is in October of 2019, they had ran TIL for many years because TIL's been around since the 80s from Dr. Berg. But literally right before I came down for that follow-up appointment, they had to shut down their trial because they didn't have the infrastructure for it anymore. All their employees that had the certifications and everything got recruited. And so at that appointment, they had told me that my last options were basically to do single PD-1, which would be like Keytruda plus a chemo pill called Ibrance at the same time, and or do TIL. And then they asked me if they ever had harvested me for it. And I said, no, it's on the sheet. And when it says harvest, it's just says NA. And so I asked them to further tell me about it, and they did. But since they didn't have it anymore, they did mention Iovance's name. And they said, we went to the computer, pulled it up. They said, find a location, because I was going to have to travel to it. There wasn't one in Texas at the time, and call up there, figure out out who the oncologist is that's running the trial at the trial site, and we could start getting to let them know, and then they could get my records sent over and everything. And both in physical location, but then also the most practical was Aurora, Colorado. I'm from Colorado Springs. And both of my parents met at their first year at college. They were going to school in Greeley, I think, and they had met there. And anyways, but my grandparents lived in Aurora, and it was literally like off of 225 in Mississippi. So it was like 5 minutes down the road from the hospital. And grandfather on my mom's side, he had been treated there for leukemia in 2011, 2012 before he had passed. And so I knew that hospital was close by. There was a home base, and it was kind of the sign when I pulled up the Iovance sheet, and it had these 57 global locations, like half of them were in the States. But I'm looking at all these places, like I've never been to New York, I've never been to Florida, but the shortest distance, but also is a sign, there's a home base for me right down the street. And so I picked that and got the ball moving, and that's kind of how that got started. And so I flew out there in November of 2012 and signed my consent on November 6th, went back and did a colonoscopy and my tumor resection November 24th and 25th of 2019. And I was scheduled originally to enter the hospital to start my lymphodepletion December 16th or December 19th. And my original infusion date was the day after Christmas. But I did my baseline scans. I did some CTs when I was in Colorado for my resection, and then I needed to do a brain MRI, and then I followed up with another CT in Texas on December 6th, and I went over those results on December 10th, and then that's the appointment where they said, hey, you have a brain metastasis, and it was excluded. My people at Texas Oncology talked to my folks over there at CU and said, Iovance has a ending trial date and for infusion, and that date is January 15th, and so everything had to backtrack from that date, including the washout and all this other stuff. And so there's this very specific timeline, and it all came down to I had to treat my brain metastasis and then scan again. And then that scan would have to prove that brain metastasis was stable or in reduction in order to get back in. And then the very final date to scan was on Christmas Day. Everything was closed on Christmas Day, so I had to scan on Christmas Eve, which meant I had to get all the treatment done before then. So after fighting insurance for like 6 days, and my mom was like, DMX Bulldog, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Got my approval, and I didn't have 5 days, only had 4, because the next day I got my mask made, and then 4 days I actually did 5 treatments, because on the 4th day they gave me a double dose, and the day after that was Christmas Eve, and I scanned on that day, waited over, the next week and a half, filled out my will, end of life, everything, just tried to keep it positive, and flew out to Colorado on the 2nd of January, sat down with Dr. Medina on January 3rd, and I remember it like yesterday, bro, because that feeling of your heart just hitting the floor, because she told me my mass on my occipital lobe went from 1 centimeter to 1.2, and it was half a second pause where the world stopped. But she then said it was pseudoprogression. They were going to let me back in. But it was, literally MD Anderson ran out of options, and it was either do a single immunotherapy and a chemo pill or do TIL. And to do TIL, I had to do it somewhere else. And so that's how that all got started. But
That's a wild ride, Chris.
dude, I don't know if you have one yet, and if you don't, I'm definitely going to send you one. Did you read my book, bro?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you about that. I was talking with my wife about that last night, and she looked it up on Amazon.
I will DM me your address or something after this. I gave Dr. Medina one personally for her, and then one to keep in her office so she could pass around her people. But it literally, it's 187 pages from diagnosis to getting through the treatment. In my words, I self-published it. I put a little note in the front that says, watch out, English teachers, with that red pen, because there's all kinds of, grammar errors. And
that is fantastic.
That's the experience. It's talking about getting to TILs. I had zero clue what TILs was or what cell therapy was. My concept of clinical trials was all backwards. And knowing what I know now, I'm like, with efficacies and all the statistics and everything, it's like approved treatments, they're approved. You can put those in your back pocket. But these one-time treatments, I look at it that the sooner you can get to it, or if you even know to ask about it, then you could be preserving quality of life.
Absolutely. Like I wish going into it that they could have just hey, let's do TIL off the bat. And I know there's some complications with that with the harvest and depending on where your tumors are. But if they can get that done and not cause, the sooner the better. I know from your post that they've just FDA approved the whole thing.
Last
Just was it a
February,
year ago?
February 16th of last year, dude. I remember the
Yeah.
moment,
And
it went down.
And so I have questions like, and I guess I got to sit down with Dr. Medina. I have an appointment in April, but like, for example, do people like us, like we failed something going in, right? You and I both failed some sort of immunotherapy going in. Is that the qualification for people still they have to fail something
Yes.
going in? And along those lines, like why? You know what I mean? Like, let's just, if we know a way out for people, why don't we use it? I know that there's insurance issues across the board. I was lucky. My insurance was really good. Our battles were few and far between with stuff. And it was pretty smooth sailing. I was very lucky on that point. But I think about all those other people that won't have access because of insurance issues.
That's another nail on the head topic right there, my man, because the approval that it received is as a second line to treatment. So it's for metastatic unresectable melanoma. So essentially stages 3 or 4. And we are mucosal melanoma. And so we're one of the subtypes. Out of the 153 total patients that were dosed, there's more that were actually enrolled, but the 153 that actually were dosed, 12 of them were mucosal like us, 10 of them were acral melanoma, like under the fingernail, Bob Marley, and everybody else was cutaneous. And so out of those 153, there are 6 of us that had a response, and 1 out of the 6 actually had a complete response. I'm actually a CMR, which means complete metabolic response, because when I go to scan still, I mean, everything is gone except for there's still a few spots that are now calcified and or necrotic. And that's why I'm considered a partial response on the data chart. But it's for the approval purposes, if you're a patient that had the BRAF gene, you would have had to try a BRAF inhibitor first, and then as a qualification, if you didn't have the BRAF gene, I had a CDK4 mutation with an MDM2 amplification. BRAF wasn't even an option. Those that had done an immunotherapy and then failed. So say you do an immunotherapy, 6 weeks later you scan, it's not working, you're progressing. Now you failed on an immunotherapy, you're stage 3 or 4, and you hit the rest of the inclusion qualifications, you can enter it. So that's what the current FDA approval is. What they also have, though, at this moment is there's a confirmatory trial through Iovance, and it's a global trial with about 600 or so people currently enrolling, but as a first line option. And it's got 2 arms. And one of them is where you have to do a neoadjuvant Keytruda, a single dose immunotherapy, and go through that. And if you progress on that, then you can do TIL. The second arm is you do neoadjuvant dose, and then they resect you, and then they do your infusion, and then they follow up your infusion with single dose immunotherapies, on which the preliminary data right now looks extremely promising. But whenever this trial, it's called TILVANCE 301, whenever that's completed, that should be the first approved first line treatment for any solid tumor adoptive cell therapy for TILs. This past year, also Adaptimmune, they had their trial approved for TIL, but it's for sarcoma, but also again, a solid tumor cancer, but also I believe it's a second line of treatment. Even though it's not a first line of treatment, they're making steps to where it will be a first line of treatment, but it's a biologics. They have to file a BLA, biologics logistics application, because it's not something that you can go get off the shelf. It's customized per person, per patient. And so if your cells that they're going to grow, I mean, like, they can't get lost. There can be no F-ups. It's a completely different process, and they're working through all of that right now at the FDA and how they're going about getting these approved. And so they can go from second-line therapies to first-line therapies. A lot of some of that process that they're kind of following as a pre-guide roadmap is a lot of the things that they've been done with CAR T therapies, which is for hematologic cancers, which has been approved now for, I think, about 7 years or so. But that's the thing. If these types of treatments aren't being done at the facilities where you're going to, or your doctor's not aware about it, they're not able to tell you about it because they just don't know. And so that's kind of the whole mission of all this, is us talking about it, kind of brings forth of like, hey, if, you do get a diagnosis, if you bring it up or you go look it up and you're kind of proactive, you can make the choice of if this isn't available where I'm going, where can I go to get this or even look into it? But Colorado became CU Anschutz in Colorado is now an ACT center for Iovance as an approved treatment center, as well as clinical trials. So, I mean, man, there's so much going on out there, dude.
Yeah. It's amazing stuff. What they've learned about the immune system, how they can harness that and just train your body to fight that cancer and how well it works. I could tell something was definitely changing 3 days out from the hospital. I was like, oh, something's happening. It's either working or I'm going to be dead in a week, sort of thing.
When you went into the hospital for your 2-week stay, were you very mobile? Did you happen to get wheelchaired around? Were you on pain meds? Like, what was your physical state when you went in? I remember you saying that you were relatively still pretty healthy going in, but what was it like?
So yeah, I went in, I was healthy. I'd hit the exercise bike at the end of the hallway just about every day and felt like crap, right? And they're getting you neutropenic. I started feeling lousy, but I was still trying to get on that bike. I was still trying to eat. I'll tell you this, they put me on a bed alarm because as I kept getting up and moving around and they told me that you can't get up and move around. And I was so frustrated. Chris, I at one point I went down and I had my infusion machine attached to me because they plug it in your heart, right? Yeah. And I went to Jimmy John's to get a sandwich back behind Anschutz. I was walking around back there.
By the subway.
Yeah. So I went over there because I was just like, I can't be in this room anymore. So I unplugged that thing from the wall and rolled it up.
That's a total no-no. Yeah, I'm sure they were pissed.
Over there, get a sandwich. Yeah, came back and they did end up putting me on the bed alarm. I figured out where the switch was so I could get off the bed and move to the couch. I was a pain in their ass, Chris.
Man, that's greatness, dude. Oh, I love hearing that. I had a fall risk deal on my door and I was wheelchaired in there. My knees were all swung because I was so clinically declined that I wasn't moving around. And so when I got admitted, I remember I was going to use the bathroom and this nurse was going in there. I was going to take a shit and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I don't care what the protocol is. Like, how about you stand outside the door with it cracked? But I'm not having you stand literally a foot away from me while I do this. No.
I don't want an audience.
Yeah, I was just like, we're going to be here for a very long time if that's how that's going to go. I was just like, oh my God. When I had signed my consent and I was getting there, I remember specifically asking if there was anybody that had done this trial prior to me with my diagnosis or not that I could connect with and kind of what their experience was like, any kind of words of motivation, inspiration, and all that. And I remember them telling me no. And I'm sitting here thinking, is that just because there isn't anybody or you're not allowed or both? And that just frustrated the crap out of me. Were you thinking the same thing when you started it? Were you trying to find anybody or other than that one gentleman you were talking about? I'm looking for success stories.
No, I knew a little bit about TIL going into it. The NPR did something on Rosenberg or something with immunotherapies. And my wife is probably just about as educated as you are on it. Like you guys both surprised me with the knowledge that you have. I'm kind of like, just don't tell me the odds and put me through it. And so my wife had a pretty good idea. And she was talking about if we can't get into TIL within too long from Dr. Medina, maybe we can get out I think there's another hospital that was doing it in San Francisco, maybe, and get out there. I have a brother that lives in Sacramento, so and at least I have had some family close by. But I didn't have anybody to connect to. I wasn't even thinking about it just because of my experience with Steve before, and I was just like, I'm on my own here. I know my family's here. I had some good buddies that were in and out of the hospital come and visit me and kind of hang out for a little bit, but I couldn't make my head wrap around like, what if it doesn't work and it works for somebody else? And then that feeling, or watch somebody else pass away from the cancer as well. So I wasn't, at that point in time, I think I needed to do it on my own.
Absolutely. Do you have any long-term side effects from any of the treatments that you did prior to TIL, like hypothyroidism, fatigue, or any pains?
I've been lucky on that end. I had a blood clot before I was diagnosed, and they think that was a function of the cancer. That's kind of the biggest issue I got. I'm on blood thinners. So that's about it right now. Past that, nothing hyperthyroidism or anything like that. It's the only permanent side effect besides the vitiligo, white hair. Yeah, we're warriors, man. We're brothers with that stuff.
Eyelash.
The eyelashes, white eyelashes are horrible in the sun. Oh my God.
I can't step outside at all without sunglasses. And I ended up getting uveitis, which turned to cataracts that was caused by the immunotherapy because my eyes were so deteriorating before I did TIL. And then I ended up having to have cataract surgery, but the sensitivity is intense. The light, it doesn't matter if it's kind of sunny or really sunny, it's a must. I didn't know that was something that other patients like yourself, I know how intense that sensitivity is with the eyelashes and the eyes.
Yeah. It's awful. I did have a side effect. Like I remember being in class, I'm teaching, and it was after TIL. I'm back in my classroom, and my eyes, it was almost foggy, like cataracts, like you're saying. I was like, oh my God, I can't see anything. It's almost instant. Like all of a sudden it was just like, I have to get out of here. I have to get an eye doctor. I'm calling down to Anschutz. I was like, what's happening to me? So they gave me some steroids. I got back down. That was helping a little bit. And then it came back. I had to go did you have to get the shots in your eyes? The steroid shots?
I got video of it.
Oh
Yeah.
my God.
It's on my
I was
YouTube page.
I was down at Anschutz talking to the doctor, and she's telling me they're going to put the shots and steroids in my eyeball, like a pellet or something. I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? Do you go back there and spin a wheel and be like, this is what we're going to do to him next? I was so frustrated with that, but that was pretty minor. My eyes are going bad with age for sure. Yeah, so that's, I don't know if it's worse from all that stuff with the TIL or not, but I'm going to be 50 this year, Chris. So maybe it's time for me to get some glasses. These are my reading glasses, so I can see the screen.
So other than your reading glasses, you don't need prescription glasses for any driving or anything else?
Well, I haven't been tested. Funny story along those lines. I could go in and they're like, oh yeah, you can't drive until you have glasses. My son is just turning 15, and we were at the DMV for him to get his permit test. And so he's having his eyes checked on the chart, right? They change the screen up in front of you. And so I was kind of standing by him, and I was just seeing like, I can still see all those letters, and he's reading them off, and I'm like, oh, I pick them out just fine. I passed this test. So I think I'd be okay.
I had to go order an insert for my snowboard goggles because I can't read a street sign without the glasses. And to actually order snowboard goggles specific with your prescription is mega expensive, but there's these insert things, then they just pop in the front of your snowboard goggles.
No kidding.
So imagine you get foggy once in a while, you got to clean that, but now also you got to clean that plus the insert. But it could be worse. It's not like I'm going to put on my glasses, then put my snowboard goggles over it. That's just going to be a headache.
Interesting. I didn't know they had that. I just bought brand new goggles. I'm proud of them because they're light sensitive, right? So that they change with the light, and those are pretty slick. That's the good stuff right there. The inserts, is it just like a website and you send them your prescription and they send you
These are my goggles, right? Regular, all that. Well, yeah. I believe I ordered these. You send in your prescription like you would like your regular eyeglasses, and then they send you one of these things. And I think I got it on Sport RX or something like that. But it looks like this, dude. And it's literally your glasses prescription.
That's wild.
And so scope it out, bro. Like, so you just take it and then you stick it within here. It's like a one size fits all. So it doesn't matter like what size goggles you got. You just kind of wedge them in there, and then they kind of like lock into place, and they're like flex fit kind of a scenario. You see how well you can kind of see that. But I had friends who were trying to wear their goggles over their eyeglasses, or just not wear their glasses at all. And it's like, snowboarding can be dangerous enough as it is. I don't care what level you are. You could be amateur, beginner, hanging out at Discovery Park all day, like on the greens, or you could be going down Mary Jane's most gnarliest bowls, or cruising down Outhouse. You know what I'm saying? Anybody in Colorado that's been to Winter Park, world famous for Mary Jane, I mean, like, you got to watch out where you're going, bro. But this right here was a game changer for me. I mean, if I had the dough, I would order straight from Oakley and just get the actual goggle itself, so I wouldn't have to have the inserts. But shit, Oakley's my brand when it comes to goggles, eyeglasses. But these inserts, man, they were a game changer. Say, because I wasn't ever going to have anything cancer related prevent me from doing anything that I had done before. I kind of had this mentality of, I don't care how bad you kicked my ass and nearly put me in the ground. It's like,
yeah.
I mean, hence my snowboard. That was my first one. This is the one I currently use. My skateboard.
Nice. What snowboard are you riding nowadays?
So this still is it's a ride board, actually. I just got a crap ton of stickers all over it. But man, I bought it off a buddy of mine back, I don't know, it's probably been over 10 years ago. So it's probably, Yeah, 10, 11 years ago. Like, and he was a dude that only went like once a year and just wasn't going enough. And I wanted a new one and he sold it to me cheap and I tattooed it with all these stickers.
You
What I'd
should.
really like to get, I put new bindings on it, K2s, which are today like now old, but what I want to get me a pair of clues. Like,
Yeah. The
get a
step
clue, you
on
just,
ones.
well, yeah, I tried to step on ones years ago, but this was like way before Clue came out. And this was probably like in my early 20s or late teens. And to be honest, they sucked. I mean, they would pop out off me. That's what I kind of like about snowboarding is like if you crash, you're not chasing your skis. They don't disconnect.
Yeah, you're not coming apart. Yeah.
I definitely, I follow Jonathan Beckhouse, boards all over the place. Snowboard Jesus. Do you follow that guy?
I
Does he
saw
sound
him on
familiar?
Instagram. Yeah, Snowboard
Dude,
Jesus.
I want to go to what he does. Tell me, Doodad.
I do know of Dude Dad, and my younger brother works at Home Depot and ran into him. And funny story about that, because he sent my wife and I a picture of him, his arm around Dude Dad. And I'm like, who's that? Why are you sending me this picture of this random? And he's like,
Doodad.
It's Dude Dad. I was like, okay, yeah, I get it. But yeah, I never see him around town. My brother, I guess, does at Home Depot.
I never had children. I had to do fertility preservation before I started my initial treatments because one of the first treatments after some of my major surgeries was radiation to my primary, which meant radiation towards my rectum. And so, but my siblings both have children. I got nieces and nephews galore. So I totally dig into the Uncle Chris thing and can't be a dude dad, but I can be a dude uncle. So like I love stepping into that uncle role thing. And I just paid the bill last October for the fertility preservation. So it's not like a off the chart, never gonna happen thing for me. And the gun still works. I'm just shooting blanks. But those are some of the things that are also not talked about a lot, especially for people that go through our type of diagnosis and have to do. Sense of urgency is insane. Like there's no time for second guessing. You got to get treatment, and side effects are intense. So you got to kind of just be proactive with the planning. And that was another one of those things. But fertility preservation, my eyesight, hypothyroidism, like I eventually got on the right dosage with the Synthroid, which is my daily med. But the charging of my batteries, even it's been now 5 years since I got out of the hospital, but testing my energy levels, it's like I can run my batteries down, but the recharge rate is still a trial and error thing for me. It's like, how hard am I going to run my batteries down? That's why I was real curious to know if you have any kind of hardcore fatigue or any pains from any of the treatments. And it seems a real collective that it's usually the treatments prior to TIL that bring on long-term side effects and not actually from doing TIL.
Yeah, I've been fortunate on that end. Like if I do have more fatigue than I had going in, I don't notice it now. I still do what I'm going to do. I can probably say that my hangovers are worse, but that might be because I'm getting older anyway. So that's I try to keep it to 2 beers unless I'm really having a good time with some buddies doing something, and then I might do 4, but I try not to go too much more than that unless I'm on a raft trip, and then then I lose count. Yeah, I lose count throughout the day.
I tell people, it's like I quit drinking. I did quit drinking liquor, like hard liquor, but I just stick to beer. I'm a beer guy, and that's completely cool for me. I took a while. It's like when they say when the dust settles, it's like you finish treatment and you start feeling better, but you don't really know how everything is until some time's gone by and you can kind of test the waters to kind of see how it's really going to be.
I can say this too, that I was tracking my workouts I would do in the gym. I've lost a lot. And I don't know if it was muscle mass or what, but I've definitely lost a step or 5. And, part of that I could say it's because I'm getting older and, it's harder for me to keep up with the 25 and 30-year-old kids that I'm working out with. That could have been a side effect. It may not have been. Who knows? Could have just been me getting old. And so that's something I have noticed. But as far as slowing me down day to day, like I don't feel like I've been fortunate. I don't feel like I've been missing much.
That's awesome. I mean, to still rock and roll. I mean, man, you're chasing around a 15-year-old. Same like that in itself, especially if you're going to shred the mountain. Do you go all day with your son when you're bored, or do you do a few runs with him and then he goes off with his friends, or how?
Yeah. So generally our routine is we get up, like if we're doing a day trip, we'll go up and try to get first chair wherever we're going, because you got to beat I-70 traffic. So you might as well leave the house at 4 a.m. and hang out and make coffee in the parking lot in the dark up at Copper Mountain or Winter Park, wherever you're going, and then get on the chair and we'll go until break for lunch, but we'll go until we're getting good and tired. So it's like 2:30 or so. And then part of that too is we're just trying to miss traffic on the way back. We were just up in Steamboat last weekend, and we got up there, we got dinner and then got on the lifts afterwards and got some night riding, I guess. And then got up in the next morning, Saturday morning, and rode pretty much all day till just about the lifts closed. And we got up the next morning, we slept in a little bit, but then we were out again till 1:32 or something like that before we got out of there. So we just keep going.
Like we're talking about how much more sensitive our skin is now into the sun. So you go through something like that and it wipes out all your melanocyte. When you're in snowboard gear, you're head to toe covered and everything. But when it comes to like the back of the neck and parts of your face, there's definitely face coverings. Do you have a certain sunscreen that you tend to use that's better, that more effective for you than another that you prefer? One or another.
So the banana boat, like the sport, I use a lot of that spray on stuff, especially in the summer. I still get on the river and work a couple trips every summer. So I put that on almost every day as soon as I get up. And then I reapply that a couple times through the day, probably not as much as I should, because I do
every
end up
2
getting
hours.
a little, and sometimes it's just not possible if I'm working the river or I'm not even thinking about it. I apply that probably again throughout the day at some point. I really like the hooded sun shirts.
Yes.
REI makes a really nice one. Patagonia has a couple. This brand that I buy a lot of rafting gear from is called NRS, and they might have the best one. It's a little more expensive than REI's one, but it's really, really nice. And so I throw up that hood. I got a big...
covers the neck.
I got a big hat that I throw on top of that to keep the sun off my eyes and that sort of stuff, off my face as much as possible, with the big brim. Yeah. And just a long sleeve. Some pants that I wear if I need to, but oftentimes in the summer, if I'm just bumming around town or at the pool with my son's a swimmer, so that's a lot of time at the pool. I'll just try to find a shady spot and set up a chair and stay out of the sun that way. The hard part is if I'm out working a river or something like that, is the knuckles, right? The tops of the knuckles.
Oh, yeah.
I've gotten those. So
those get exposed.
Oh, man. I bought some sun gloves. They look like biking gloves that I'll wear on my raft. On my personal raft, I have a bimini that pops up and covers us. So if I can't have that up, if it's windy or something, I'll throw those on, cover up my knuckles.
It's crazy on how some of the parts that you never really think that you need to cover, how they're exposed depending on what you're doing and what's out there to cover. Like you said, gloves, the hats, definitely your glasses, the hoods, that cover the neck, the chapstick.
Chapstick, yeah.
I had a friend that I met through social media who works for Sunfrog, who I think have one of their central locations in Colorado, and they sent me some sticks, but it's specific to sport use. So a lot of outdoor biking, hiking board, but it also has the chapstick stuff. And that's another thing. When you're out those higher elevations, you're closer to the sun and you're that much more exposed to it. But kind of blows my mind sometimes how many people often forget about simple things like the chapstick, anything that's exposed.
Yeah, it happens so fast.
You don't even think about it because you never assume, like, when you step outside, how long you're actually going to be outside and how direct you're being impacted on. And before you know it, boom, you have to hydrate twice as much. You got to cover up twice as much. You got to apply twice as much.
I carry this thing around with me everywhere I go.
It's wild. It's one of those things I tell people, UV rays and the sun and all that had nothing to do with my actual diagnosis. We just got the crap look of the draw. Mucosal melanoma is like 1 out of 100 of the skin cancer cutaneous realm. But when you bring up the word melanoma as part of mucosal melanoma, that's usually what triggers people, that are somewhat familiar with melanoma. It's like, oh, sun damage. And it's like, no, it's not. But after you go through the treatment like we did, like we're probably more at risk to the sun than prior because you don't have that melanocyte layer protection. It's wild. It at first was just really splotchy all over, and it kind of took a while for it to kind of settle down, and it kind of made me self-conscious for a little bit. In fact, when my hair first started growing back in, by the time I went to go get like my first haircut, I was still self-conscious and I dyed it. Like I got a bunch of pictures to where I only did it that once, but it's like brown, with white underneath. Like when I was in high school, I would go get the blonde tips, dark brown hair, and I would dye it with the blonde tips. And that was like kind of backwards. And I was just kind of let it grow out. Turns out, this right here that we got, people pay mad money to get this color, bro. I've had a lot of ladies tell me, did you, especially the women out there, the platinum silver or whatever the hell it is they call it, but They're spending mad money to get this color, dude. And it's au natural.
Well, you and I kind of did pay mad money to get this color.
And how can you put a price on your life? Like you spend X amount on insurance and all, but the end of the day, I still tell people then when they ask what's the greatest part or whatever, and I'm like, shit, I still woke up today. I have not forgotten what
I get
it
to be
was
vertical
like
today
when I was fighting for it. So, I mean, even just the simplest thing, and then it's like I woke up, and so I've already hit my peak of the day. Doesn't matter what happens after that moment. It could be good or bad or ugly or whatever. Shit, I still woke up. It's crazy. Working, man, you got the children and everything. We have to continue with part 2, part 3, and so on. There's so much to cover. But as for the day, before we finish this episode, man, is there anything that you want to mention, say, tell anybody, if you could tell your prior self, travel back in time, what would you want the world to know?
I think more than anything, if people could understand that your psyche gets hurt worse than anything else going through the cancer process. I think the hardest wounds I had to go through and deal with was what I was thinking that the cancer process was going to be, how it was affecting my family, how angry I was. If you can get on top of that, fighting cancer is a lot easier. I think that was said and done. The whole mortality, what's going to happen next thing, that sucks. But it was almost like my brain was working harder against me. That was my daily fight. Like, I'm not dead today. I'm going to go do the things I enjoy, even if they're bittersweet. And I'm going to move on to the next day. And I probably won't be dead tomorrow or 2 weeks from now. And so just keep trucking. I think that would be like, if I could go back and tell myself that there's doctors out there, there's science that's solid, that can show you a light at the end of the tunnel. Get on top of your psyche so that you can be a pleasant person to be around.
100%, Gary. Again, hit the nail on the head. The mental health aspect, that to me is like the top of the pyramid. And I love how you mentioned that. I've seen this in some war movies, but it's one of those things where it's like, once you accept or know that this could be a possibility, kind of accept that at some point we're all born and eventually will pass, but to not focus on that, it's easy to die. It's a lot harder to live. That mental health part of it and really getting that psyche in the spot to where you can, mind works in conjunction with your body and they got to be in sync. And that's a huge aspect for survivorship. So I'm so glad that you touched on that and brought that up. Man, thank you for taking the time and talking with me on TIL Talks.
This is awesome, Chris. I'm glad you're doing this. This is cool.
Absolutely, my man. You were literally the first person I came across or found an article on that was close to my age, had my diagnosis, did the treatment. It worked. We did it at the same place with the same doctor. It was like, there was more things aligned with that. And it's that sense of community. And so I was so bummed out last March that I wasn't able to go snowboarding. The pass closed. And then also my doctors were telling me my hips were going to collapse on me, which that's a whole nother episode. That never happened. But I was really bummed out, bro. I wanted to shred with you.
We gotta find some time to do that. You let me know when you're around, and we'll make some time. We'll head up to Winter Park or wherever you want to go.
Whatever's clever. All right, that concludes today's episode of TIL Talks with Chris White as we talk TILs, tumor-infiltrating lymphocytes, and all advanced cell and gene therapies. As a reminder, I am not a medical professional or medical expert. I am only a professional expert on my story and my experience. If you are needing or seeking medical advice or assistance, please reach out to your care team. I'd like to thank my guest today for joining me on TIL Talks. To our listeners who have not yet done so already, please follow, comment, subscribe, share, and smash that like button. For more information about TIL Talks and related resources, please visit www.tiltalks.com. I'm Chris White. As always, sending love to everybody. Peace.